Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Annie Auerbach, and she's here to share with us her new book, Flex, Reinventing Work for a Smarter, Happier Life. I know so much has changed during this time of COVID, and many of us are asking, is the 9-to-5 office schedule working for us anymore? Well, Annie is here to answer just that. Annie is a speaker, consultant, brand strategist, and the co-founder of trends agency Starling, which specializes in helping brands understand cultural change in order to stay relevant. Starling's clients include PepsiCo, Google, Nike, and many more. So let's welcome to the show, Annie Auerbach.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's such a pleasure to be on your show.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I have been fascinated by flexible working because I've been working flexibly myself for 20 years. And I have to tell you, Marianne, it's had its highs and lows, and it's been quite difficult. And I wanted to write a handbook which explained all the tips and advice from pioneering men and women who have been flexibly working for years to give people almost the advice that I never had 20 years ago, the book that I never got to read myself. And so that's really why I wanted to write it on a personal note.
What do you think is some of the reasons people kind of stay stuck and don't look for that flexibility?
Well, I think up till very recently, the way that we've been living and working has been incredibly rigid. So we've been working 9 to 5 or longer, and often we've had long commutes at either end of the day. And that has meant that we are almost driving ourselves to exhaustion. And when I was looking into all the different research, it said that actually there's a better way to live, which is to really understand yourself and your creativity, your body and your rhythms, your circadian rhythms and your moods. And if you can create a way of living and working that works with you rather than against you, and allows you to care for the people in your life at the same time as having the career and the ambition that you have, that surely is something to aim for. And then, of course, I wrote the book for 2018. So then, of course, COVID happened and the whole world suddenly tipped into working from home. So all of the ideas that I had been monitoring for the last sort of 20 years suddenly tipped into the mainstream, and everybody tried to navigate this new way of working. So it feels like such an apt time to be having this conversation as we all lean into a new flexible life.
Well, I know you start your book off with Flex Your Mind, and I'm really just intrigued by how you present that. When you're talking about Flex Your Mind, what do you mean?
So I really wanted to talk about flex, not just in terms of work, but much more holistically in terms of our mind and our creativity and also our body and also our futures. But I wanted to start with mind because we know that creativity is going to be one of the top 3 skills we'll need in the future. Yet, the way we're living our lives is making it really quite difficult to be creative. I don't know whether you can empathize with this, Marianne, but when we're on social media, often we're in a bit of an echo chamber and we're listening to the same voices as ourselves, and we're falling into a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy whereby the tastes that we have are just being confirmed back at us. Plus, of course, the fact that tech is making us ever more distracted. So it's really hard to have a period of deep work or deep concentration when you get in the flow because your email's pinging or you feel like you need to be contactable 24/7, or indeed in the way we're living at the moment, a lot of us have our children at home if we're parents, and that's quite an interruptive thing because we're helping them with schooling and all their emotional needs as well. So it felt like a really urgent topic because if we know that we'll need to be creative, and yet our environments are making us less creative, what can we do about that?
It's really something to think about and kind of dive into. And I know you talk about in your book that, we really, what people are looking for, what industries that are creative are looking for are T-shaped people. I'd love for you to share what that means.
So the creative industries are on the hunt for what they call T-shaped people. And the vertical bit of the T, if you can imagine, that's depth of experience, that's expertise. But the horizontal bit at the top of the T is a sense of empathy, a broader experience across lots of different subjects, and it allows you to join the dots between stuff that hasn't necessarily been connected before. Allows you also to collaborate with different minds, with diverse people that haven't necessarily shared the same life experiences you have. And it's really hard to be T-shaped these days because, as I said, we're being funneled into these more I-shaped, if you like, ways of living. So we really need to pay attention to the horizontal bit at the top, the cross of the T, which allows us to exercise our empathy muscles to broaden our horizons. And of course, travel would be one way of doing this. And of course, that's not something we're able to do these days, but travel has been proven to really broaden our minds and allow us to step out of our comfort zones, get out of habituation, which means that you keep doing the same things and thinking the same things. But if we can't do that, what can we do? And I think we need to be really conscious of the people we surround ourselves, the people we follow on social media, and try and pick people who are as diverse as possible rather than the same old loud voices. Also try and read things you wouldn't normally read. Read authors that you've never heard of before rather than going back to the same people again and again. And these tiny little tricks, even things like taking a different route from A to B. In the olden days where we actually went into the workplace, people get very stuck in their rhythms and routines and they end up taking the same route every single day. But the notion of mixing it up a bit means we notice new things. We look up and around instead of looking down at our feet. And even that allows us to make different connections and notice different things and bring fresh perspectives to our day.
How important is that? You have this quote in your book that really kind of stuck with me, and I think really goes with this. It says, "We all swim in the cultural soup. Our creativity comes from how we respond to it." And a lot of times people don't even really dive into their response action.
Exactly. So we're all living through the same conditions right now, really. I mean, for example, COVID has been a great leveler in many ways, in that we're all experiencing the huge anxiety of living through a pandemic. And we're all, as I said, experiencing this shift to being at home. But our response to that can be quite different. And, in terms of what we're actually going through, people's everyday experiences are vastly different. Some people are feeling lonely and isolated. Some people feeling overwhelmed and not finding any quiet in a very busy home, which has people in it all the time. And so our response to that, on how we actually lean into it and create different ways of working and living, is key here.
So, in your experience with all the people you've worked with, do you find that women have a more difficult time flexing their work, or is it mostly men?
No, I think you've hit on a really interesting topic, Marianne, because despite women often being the pioneers of flexible working and those that were really pushing the boundaries, partly because they had more of the emotional load at home and the child caring responsibilities and caring for elderly relatives and so on. Despite that, they really haven't been the victors of the switch to working from home at all. So all the research says that women are being made redundant in bigger numbers than men. Women are being made furlough in bigger numbers than men. They are falling out of the workforce. And all the huge breakthroughs and progress that women made over the last 10, 20 years is on the cusp of being reversed, which I find incredibly worrying. And also, when you look at it in a softer way, almost about the emotional load at home, who is really managing all of the day-to-day tasks and all of the whether that be housework, whether that be homeschooling, whether that be care in looking after your community. It seems again that women have been doing a lot more of that globally, and that's making them feel more exhausted, more burnt out, less supported. It's a topic that really requires our deep attention at the moment.
Is that probably why you hear about women that are really getting burnt out right now? It's just they're not really being able to invest in being able to have more of a flexible life altogether?
I think so. I think I actually wrote a chapter in the book which was Flex in the Home. And that felt a bit counterintuitive at first, because I guess when we think about flexibility, we're always thinking about work flexibility, maybe working part-time or maybe being able to work in a different location from a central workplace. But home for me felt so important, because if we don't have flexibility at home, what real gains can we make at flexibility in the workplace? And what I mean by that is understanding the different dynamics that go on in people's home lives, in people's private lives. And that will change over time, right? So, it might be at certain points in our lives we're super expansive and we've got really loads of ideas. Maybe we want to do some side hustles. Maybe we want to do some charity work in the side. Maybe we want to have lots of different parallel things going on in our life. And we might need flexibility in order to cope with that. But then there might be other things going on, because life has a habit of throwing curveballs in our way. Maybe a relative gets ill. Maybe our relationship is on the rocks. Maybe our teenager needs our attention. And sometimes you don't feel expansive. And in fact, you feel like you need to concentrate more on being able to lean into what's happening in your home life. And if we're not able to do that, and if we're not offered that kind of flexibility, often it's women that feel the pressure to say, this simply doesn't work anymore, and I can't do it. And that's why we're seeing this huge exodus of women from the workplace, because they're not being offered the flexibility they need. And also, they've got all this load on their shoulders at home. It's not as shared. Now, I know there's some amazing men out there who are absolutely stepping up and sharing the load. My husband is one of them. But on the whole, when you look at the statistics and the reports globally, that's not happening. And that's why it's really falling on women's shoulders.
Yeah, you hear so much about how moms are now taking over, educating their children. When it's like, when they probably already had an overfull plate to begin with, and now education's part of it. And we all appreciate our teachers right now, by the way, too.
So much. So much respect for them.
Yeah. Well, and I know you have so many stories in your books, your book in regards to people that have really flexed their life in one way or another. Do you have one you can share with us?
Yeah, for sure. There's a wonderful lady called Amelia Tarode who I interviewed, and she is the founder of a creative consultancy called the Form Break Collective. And she had been working in a particular way for a long time. So she'd been working for ad agencies for about 20 years. And she had been working very long hours. And at this time, she had a time to think about how she wanted to live and work, because very suddenly and very sadly for her mum was battling cancer, and she took time out to look after her and care for her. And she told me about the process that she went through. And she thought, there must be another way of working. There must be another way of spending your time wisely and smartly. And she talked about a Martin Luther King quote in which he talks about the fierce urgency of now. And she says she felt that very, very deeply. So she founded a new business called the Form Break Collective. And it has flexibility at its heart. They value impact rather than input. So in other words, the bums on seats, the amount of hours that you put in. And they have no HQ. They've got a flat hierarchy, and they've embedded that way of working into very, very sort of deep into the fabric of how they work, which means they're able to have access to all this fantastic talent and work very creatively. And I found that very inspiring. And actually, I set up a business with my partner, Adam, and our business is called Starling, and it is a cultural insight agency. So we look at the big societal trends that are happening all over the world, and we advise brands on how they can be more relevant. And we embedded flexibility very much in the way that we work. We actually take the summer off. So we work 10 out of 12 months a year. I don't know whether that sounds quite unusual, but for us, we felt like it was a really big step to take, because when you give yourself the time to pause, you actually are investing in your own self and your own minds and your own creativity. We had the freedom then in those summers to read and to study and to learn and to spend time with our friends and families to really rest and recuperate. And when we came back in September, we were firing on all cylinders. And it felt like we were giving almost a better service to our clients because we were taking that time out.
Yeah, really taking care of yourself and putting not just yourself first, because when we look at taking care of ourselves, a lot of times people just go, they work, and their mental well-being isn't really taken care of. But when we're doing better mentally, we also show up better for our clients and the people we work with.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's happening really. I don't know your experience at the moment, but in terms of how people are working during this pandemic, it feels like working hours are getting longer and longer, and people's workloads are increasing, and they are there's so much blurred time where they are trying to, as you say, do everything else in the home, whether that be homeschooling or whatever. Our attention's incredibly fragmented and we're really exhausted. And so it feels like a really important time right now to think about the importance of rest and switching off. When you're at home and you're working at the kitchen table or from the sofa, it's really hard because there's no geographical distance between home and work. It's literally intertwined in the environment that you're living in. So it means that we have to be even more intentional and have boundaries and have edges to our life in order to actually protect our mental well-being.
Well, and you guys were way ahead of your time as far as talking about flexibility in the workplace, and now we're in this time of COVID. Most people kind of have that when working from home, but how do they make it really work? What are some tips for people that they can make that flex work for them every day?
Well, what I would say is that you do need to build hard edges into your flexibility. Flex sounds like a very soft and pliable word, but unless we have boundaries and we have edges, we can end up bending over backwards and trying to be all things to all people. So to make it work, one of the things that we took for granted really is the notion of the commute. We didn't necessarily like it because it was long, it was expensive, it was stressful. But what it did is it gave us a transition from a leisure period to a working period. And we don't have that anymore because all of our life is bang up next to each other. That we're experiencing something that psychologists call context collapse. So you can go from a work meeting to cooking a meal to chatting with your partner to another work meeting, and everything is boom, boom, boom on top of each other in these usually hour slots. And I think what we need to do is build some of that fake commute or transition time into our days. So when you start the day, have a fake commute. Go for a walk, go for a bicycle if you're allowed, to mimic that commute and allow for decompression and transition from one state to the other. There's a German word which is Feierabend, a word which describes the time after work is done and a period of leisure and rest begins. So is there anything you can do to mark the end of the day whether that be something like switching on some music or lighting candles or literally putting away the computer. If you don't, some of us are working in very cramped places. So if you don't have a separate room in which you're working, is there a drawer that you can put it out of sight? So that allows you to transition into a different place. And I think those are some of the tips. The other thing is don't default to Zoom all the time. So I think sadly, when we've made the transition so quickly to working from home, we've kind of ended up importing all of the same practices that we would have in the workplace just straight into our homes. So the presenteeism, the long hours, and actually we don't need to be on back-to-back Zoom calls all day. Sometimes we can take a phone. If we need to speak to someone, we can go for a walk and be on a phone call with them and not be at a screen. And walking, it's proved, when you have walking meetings, you get to really good ideas. So that might be something to do, is not default to sitting, staring at a screen for the entire day.
I think we've had a really good reminder of that recently, where a group of attorneys were getting together for a discussion, and one gentleman showed up as a cat. So sometimes it's okay to just use the phone. I
know. There's another brilliant one in the UK where a boss turned herself into a potato on Zoom somehow. Potato. So it just shows the absurdity of it all, really, doesn't it? That we've almost kind of sleepwalked into this new way of working, and there's some hilarious moments.
So what if you're dealing with someone who's like a power couple and they're trying to really flex both their work and their relationship? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I had a really interesting conversation when I was writing my book with an amazing gender and future of work expert called Aviva Wittenberg-Cox. And she had this fantastic idea of checking in with yourself. And she thought it would be an interesting moment in time to do it every 7 years, because apparently that's the number of years that it takes for the cells to replace in the body. So you kind of go through this new rebirth in a way. And she suggested that you check in every or periodically to find out what your common vision is or common goals. So what do you really want? What's worked over the last few years? What hasn't worked? Are you in a period of expansion, or are you looking to sort of consolidate life? Is one of you really wanting to step forward and the other one slightly step back? Or are you both wanting to step forward? And therefore, what do you need to do that? And what kind of conversations do you need to have? What do you need to negotiate? What support do you need? And I think that it's not really a habit for most of us to have these types of conversations. We're not really told how to do it, because most of the time we're just in the everyday. We're in the now. We're sometimes firefighting, really, to get stuff done and make sure everybody's okay. So it does take a little bit of stepping back, giving yourself the time and space to have a think about really what you want from your work and your life and your home and your relationships, and how you can together have each other's backs and make that happen.
Yeah, it's really about building more of an empowered relationship and space, and I really appreciate that about your book. In fact, I was kind of chuckling a little bit because when you talk about how to flex your home, one was be sensitive, and, we're not going to go through all of them, but is model good behavior for your children. Yeah. And I think right now with so many people, we're kind of crammed together, that might be a little challenging.
Oh my God, it's so challenging, And the research that you're referring to in the book is that when they studied the different tasks that are done in the house, often the women do more of the sort of daily tasks that are inside the house, so things like the washing and the cleaning and the childcare, and men do some of the more outside tasks, like the bins and anything to do with the garden, but also the stuff which might be more admin-y and happen periodically, like I don't know, paying bills or insurance and things like that. And that's very stereotypical, but the studies have shown that that's how it has been allocated in the past. And to be honest, I think all of us have sort of some kind of unequal allocation of all the stuff we're doing, because we're just trying to get it done. But what is a really good idea is to try and understand, if it can't be absolutely 50-50 and divided down the middle, how can it feel equitable, and how can it feel that you've got each other's backs and you're supporting each other and you're playing to each other's strengths? So trying to sort of model behavior for your kids, so it's not always dad who takes out the bins and, mum who's wiping the surfaces, and how you can actually ensure that you're not solidifying some of those stereotypes that we have been brought up with, really.
Yeah, it's such a different experience. It was interesting when you talk about flex the body in your book. You really are talking about something much different than I think people would automatically perceive.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about flex the body, we probably think about yoga, Pilates, all fantastic things. I love yoga and Pilates. But what I was talking about with this chapter is really listening to your body and flexing your life to work with it rather than against it. And that comes from my own experience, really, because it's only fairly recently I actually started listening to my own body. I'd been on this kind of, a conveyor belt where I'd almost treated my body like a machine. So it was kind of keep going. If you feel sick, pop a pill, carry on, keep moving. And it felt like forcing yourself to carry on and not really listening to your own body is such a lost opportunity, because actually we have superpowers when we listen to our bodies, and we really understand when we're working at our best. And in this chapter, I looked at two different things. Number one, I looked at circadian rhythms and whether we are early morning larks and night owls, for example. And the 9 to 5 is such a rigid system that it's not really playing to the strengths of either those larks or those owls, because their most sort of productive time of the day is probably when they're not in the office at all. So it struck me that was a lost opportunity. And then the other area that I looked at was the area of menstrual cycles. And I've definitely grown up with pretty much quite a lot of silence around menstrual cycles, but definitely seeing them as a negative, really. It's always been portrayed as a negative to me. Whereas actually when I started to really understand what was happening in the average month, and the fact that actually we go through 4 seasons, spring and summer and autumn and winter in our cycles, and those have very different emotional and physical states to them, it made me think, gosh, well, what if I was able to flex my monthly schedule so that I could be more in tune with my cycle? And when I was at my most confident and my most energetic, I could plan certain events or meetings. Of course, it's not possible all the time to do that, but even to be aware of it felt like you're on the front foot. You're actually understanding yourself better, and you're giving yourself the best opportunity to do a good job and feel happy with where you're at, rather than kind of ignoring all of that and powering through and sometimes feeling depleted and like you're failing.
I love the analogy that you use in your book in regards to just how we are as people, and you reference some different bird types. And I'd love for you just to choose one and just share a little bit about it with us.
Sure. So there's 3 different bird types which kind of describe different circadian rhythms. So let's take an early morning lark. Larks they usually tend to sleep between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. They probably find it hard to sleep in, even on the weekend, and even when they think, oh, I'll give myself a lovely lie-in, they probably wake up earlier. And for them, their peak productivity is around noon, and then they fizzle out towards the early evening. So you as a lark, let's say, could fit in your morning exercise before the day gets started. And you should probably do your most challenging work first thing, because that's when you're firing on all cylinders. And in the afternoon, when you're starting to slow down, that's when you can do more administrative stuff and stuff that doesn't require as much creativity. And then, stuff like networking after work, when we still did stuff like that, that's not fantastic for the larks, because they're actually starting to get tired and they're less sociable then. So maybe for them, social activities could be earlier in the day, like lunch or coffees, and less at the later. And all of this stuff really, it makes sense when you start to think about it. But I think it's very ignored in work culture. We're assumed that we're all the same, and we all fit into one template. And we know that's not true. And in fact, we know that workplaces that have a more inclusive vision and allow more diversity are actually better workplaces in terms of making better decisions and coming up with better ideas and being more innovative. So allowing people's differences to be strengths and allowing them to play to those strengths feels like a real breakthrough.
Yeah, that can be such a win-win for so many people if we're really, kind of focused on the people, and it gives them the opportunity to be there present and do such a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all you want really is the trust to be able to do what you need to do in the way that best works for you. And that seems like a little thing, but it is quite a big change to how things have been.
Well, Annie, I really loved your book, Flex, and I thought it was a great read and so informative. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Oh, thank you so much. You could have a look at the work we do at Starling at starlingstrategy.co.uk. And I'm on Twitter, Annie Auerbach, and Instagram as well. So please do drop me a note and tell me how it's all going in your flexible worlds.
Well, Annie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an interesting conversation.
Well, thank you, Annie. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Flex, Reinventing Work for a Smarter, Happier Life. Flex is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, you can get that on Kindle. If you'd like to connect with Annie, you can at starlingstrategy.co.uk for more information. Well, you'll want to stay tuned for our next special guest, Dr. Dravon James, who's here to share with us how do we find refuge in the storm. On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1, 2, 3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Dr. Dravon James, who's here to share with us how do we find refuge in the storm. Now, I know many of us are asking, is it possible to find refuge in the storm of life? And whether you're going through a major life crisis or managing day-to-day struggles of the pandemic, Dr. Dravon has a prescription to support you in finding the peace, strength, and resilience to weather any storm with beauty and grace. Dr. Dravon is the founder of Everyday Peace, the host of Everyday Peace on Unity Radio, an inspirational speaker and life coach, and the author of Freedom is Your Birthright. As an inspirational speaker, her goal is to educate, empower, and inspire others to build the life of their dreams, no matter what shows up in their lives, good, bad, or otherwise. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Dravon James.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here. And my goodness, I mean, I think we all need to have a little discussion. How do we find refuge in the storm? Because right now it seems that that's all that we're kind of going through.
Yeah, doesn't it? It really feels that way. Like as soon as we think we are getting to the shore, there's another tidal wave of something that happens. And life is kind of like that. If we really were to go back and reflect, that it is this, it's a circle. Right. And so knowing how to exist and to not only exist, but to thrive, knowing that this is the journey and we're meant to get something out of this journey. This is not meant to, beat us down and make us feel like we're less than and we can't survive. That's not the point here.
Well, it's like with anything, we never know the true test of our mettle, of our soul, unless we are met with fire, and sometimes, we get a little burnt, but it really defines who we are as a people.
It really does, and there's something, my organization is called Everyday Peace, and I got to tell you that the definition we use for peace is wholeness, completeness, nothing missing, nothing broken, totality. So in that definition, which I absolutely love, it's not mine. I picked it up somewhere years and years ago, and it just really resonated with me. But I love that definition because it means that even when these things happen that look like chaos, that look like just horrible things. Who would want this? Even when that happens in our life, we can see that it's part of the wholeness. Why? Because it happened. It's part of the puzzle here. And so knowing that with this piece is wholeness, that happens and it's part of the puzzle and we're still whole. And that the second thing we focus on, or maybe equally as important, is that everything that shows up in our life, the good, the bad, and the in-between, every single thing that shows up in our life has shown up for one reason. And that reason is to bow down and serve us as we consciously create our next level of greatness.
When we look at it that way, my goodness, how empowering is that?
Right. So then you say, well, my goodness. And you look, I loved Greek mythology when I was in high school. And I would always think of like these, these gods up on the hill saying, oh, I see they've handled that, but can they take this? And, this other thunderbolt comes, right? And it seems so comical in my mind, but life sort of feels like that. You get through with this one thing and then this next thing happens. But during all of this, it's like iron sharpening iron. You mentioned that a little while ago. This is, my mother used to say, oh, this is a test, and I wasn't the kind of kid who enjoyed tests, so that would just make me so angry. Like, why do I have to take all these tests? But it really is this process of sharpening you and refining you and getting to your best you, if you choose it for that. because the choice is ours. We can say, oh my goodness, I refuse to learn. I refuse to grow. I'm just going to hurt. That's a choice too. We don't want to make that one.
No, definitely don't want to continue that because, somebody had told me a while back when we have, challenges that arise are really opportunities. And it's all about shifting our perspective to see, gosh, how we can use these opportunities to move forward. And I know that you're all about that with peace. And I just love how you approach peace. When did you first start getting interested in the topic of peace?
Oh, I love that you asked that question because I was 17 and I had graduated from high school. It was the summer before I left for college, and my brother gave me a book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. So, and a little background about my childhood was pretty traumatic. We grew up very, very financially challenged. We had some bouts of homelessness in there. And so here I am, 17 years old, and I have this little book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And I read that book, and I thought what Norman Vincent Peale did in their book was so phenomenal for me. I felt charged and excited about life. I felt powerful. And mostly I felt, he would say, pick these words. And I picked the word tranquility. And I felt tranquil when I read his book. And it led me on this quest. I knew whatever I was feeling, I wanted to help people have that feeling. So I didn't have a word for it back then. I was 17 years old. I actually thought I was looking for the answer to how to have no problems in your life. And so my quest evolved, and I realized what I had found in that moment was a way to stay in the now, in the present moment. And in that moment, I was whole. I was complete. There was nothing missing. There was nothing broken. And that sort of kind of evolved for me. It went through several iterations, and I got here knowing, this is it. This is what this whole journey is about. And can I stay in this space of remembering when the world is chaotic, when my body is in pain, when my love life is falling apart, when my children are, behaving like someone else's children, And can I remember in this moment that I am whole, that this too is part of the wholeness. I'm still safe. So that's, that was how it started for me. And that's really where this whole process remains for me today, is helping myself to remember this, helping others to remember this, and growing from this space.
That's beautiful. My goodness. When you talk about being whole, what do you mean by that? Because I think some people are like, well, my checking account's in the negative and I lost my job in the pandemic and I've gained weight and, now I have pains that I didn't have before. How can they get to this place where they feel whole?
Well, just by acceptance, because really that is part of your whole story, right? And sometimes we believe that our story should look like this. I remember when we were homeless and thinking, well, I should have, like every other little girl, a place to sleep tonight. I should have that. And that should have would cause me to be very, very angry sometimes, and at the very least disappointed. And then sometimes to try to move into denial. I pretend like, oh, maybe I do have it, But once I got to the point that of accepting, and my mom would help us to accept that this is where we are in this moment. Doesn't mean we're going to stay, but you can't move from where you are to accept where you are here. You can't move to your next level until you say, this is where I am now. So for all of those things that you just mentioned, and every last one of them is painful to say, well, I am without a job, I'm without money, I'm without health. It's painful, of course it is, to the physical journey, but it is something about being in that moment and saying, yes, I am without this, I'm without shelter, and yet I am. I am without shelter. So I am here, I'm still existed. The absence of shelter hasn't destroyed me. The absence of finances in my bank account, though very difficult, has not destroyed me. I am connected to something that is bigger than all of this. Let me harness my energy with that. Let me do me plus that, whatever that is. And find peace in that moment of acceptance and awareness. And then the situation, your anxiety, your ego can subside and rest for a moment and let creativity start to work.
You really see when people are in that moment that there is that peace that resides there. If you could just be within that moment, regardless what's going on around you, there is a lot of peace there.
Oh, my goodness. And if you have to rant, rage, and scream and all that, you do that. You cry. Because guess what that does? It brings you to the moment. Right here. It brings you into focus. And you let that spill out of you. And then you realize, even after all that, I'm still here. I am. Right? I'm still here. And then in your consciousness, now I'm waiting for some solution. Now I'm waiting for some next right action. It could be something as small as I can't tell you how many times my mom would say, let's just walk down this street, or let's just go over to this person's house that I maybe met a month ago. And they'd say, oh, come on in. I just cooked this to eat. We hadn't eaten all day. Right? Or why don't you guys stay the night? Just when you get present and you get to this place where there is no shame in me feeling fear. There's no shame in me feeling angry. There's no shame in me feeling sad. In this moment, to accept everything opens you up to experience the best of what life has for you in that moment.
Do you find that people get stuck because maybe they're not trusting that if they surrender and find that moment of peace, that, that maybe they're afraid of giving up control, or, there's something that they don't want to give up?
Yes, because we all believe that we have that sense of control is such a false sense of control, right? We believe that we have this control, whether it is a job. We believe if I continue to do a great job, then the work won't go away. If I continue to behave properly in my marriage and do the best job possible, then the marriage won't go away. If I continue to we have this false sense of control that we like because the ego wants to believe that it's safe at all times using false things. When we decide that we let go, in the letting go and saying, I'm in a space of accepting. I know I won't understand everything. I know everything won't even feel comfortable. Heck, it doesn't always feel comfortable when I'm trying to control it. But if I let go of the control and say, I want to find my peace, my safety in the curiosity, the same things will probably happen that were going to happen when you thought you had all this control. But now you don't have all the invested anxious energy in that moment. You're more taking on a position of, I'm curious. I'm curious what's going to happen here. I'm going to do my best, but I'm curious of what the outcome is going to be. Not I'm trying to control the outcome.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. And it's interesting, when we get to that place where we're like, from, just reading information and your book and listening to some of your talks, it seems like when we get to this place of surrender, that's where the magic really starts to happen.
Oh, I love that you use that word, right? We're so afraid of that word as adults, right? The magic does happen in surrender, right? It happens in gratitude, right? When those are magical acts, surrendering, letting go, that opens your chest up. Even when you say it, in the pit of your stomach, you may get these butterflies that feel like fear, but your chest starts to expand, almost like you could take wings and fly, because in the letting go, you become weightless. In this sense of unbothered, not unconcerned, just willing to be present. Right? And in the gratitude, of course, there is this sense of appreciation for everything, even the things that we don't understand, the things that we believe are bad. We love those labels, bad and good. The things that don't make us feel the way we want to feel. To become appreciative that, yes, I can feel this. I can, just the act of being able to feel this. I am aware that I would like for this to be different. Become appreciative of your awareness. This gratitude and surrendering are magic. They do so much for us that is almost words can't express, because our outside world is really determined by the condition of our inside world, that perspective that you mentioned earlier. Having a perspective that says, I live in a friendly environment. Now, some things may happen that don't feel friendly, but they've not happened. They've not occurred to destroy me. They've occurred to strengthen me. I'm going to let go and become curious about how that's going to happen.
I love that. I know you talk about how resisting the storm takes up valuable time and can create even more tension in a bigger storm. What do you mean by that?
Oh, just like when you do resistance exercises, right? You resist the exercise and that muscle gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And so you're drawing in something. Whatever you're resisting, you're putting a lot of energy into the process of resisting. And that energy attracts more things for you to resist. That muscle of resistance comes stronger. So if you're resisting, I don't know, maybe you have your mind set on this is going to be a bad situation and you're really putting all your energy into resisting that bad situation, then other situations occur that allow you the opportunity to continue to utilize that energy, continue to utilize that muscle. Why not? You're building it up. A better way of doing things is to lean in with this curiosity, almost like a childlike curiosity, and this sense of, wow, adventure. Wow, it doesn't mean that you want it to happen, but I wonder how this is going to turn out for my good. This is going to be exciting to see how this is going to turn around. Then you're using a different process, right? The energy that you're putting out is this wonderful curiosity, and it draws more of that to itself. This lightened spirit, this lightened energy, this happiness almost. Not that you're happy that it's happening, but you're happy that you can be curious about it. So resistance, remember, only brings in more stuff for you to resist. Leaning in and becoming curious about that changes the energy. And it's a very slight change. If you think about, watching a movie, and I do this a lot with my life, I often say, wow, if this wasn't happening to me, it'd be hilarious, right? But, I lean in and I say, well, I wonder what she's going to do next, that she is me, right? I wonder, and that changes it. It takes all that weight off me, and I just become curious. I just start watching Dravon, and then I watch her start to relax and start to surrender, and I start to allow. And then the magic is, my eyes open up, my creativity opens up, and I can see and feel solutions that I didn't know were right there all the time.
Oh my goodness, that's so powerful. And it's interesting because a lot of it's just like it's making these small shifts that make such a big deal. And I know one of the things that you teach on also is the power of our words.
Yeah. Words are everything. It's what we're using right now. It's what we know how to communicate with. And the only person who hears all of our words are us, right? So that self-talk is so very important. A lot of times we use our conversations with ourselves. We use that time to scare ourselves or to put ourselves down and to remind ourselves of our so-called past failures and how inadequate we are. And just becoming tuned in and listening to what you're saying to yourself on the drive home or the commute home, or, when you're doing the laundry or whatever your activities are, or when you're scared about the next project or you're watching the news. What are you saying to you about this event? Are you self-soothing and saying to yourself, well, you know what? I think you're pretty wonderful. That was a challenging situation. And you're giving yourself those loving, kind words. I tell people that when I coach people, I say, act as though you're talking to your middle schooler. Because middle school, I had two. My children are now 20 and 17. But when they're in middle school, that's that tender age where they're trying to figure it all out, and they begin to realize there are some really mean people in this world, Mommy. And so you sit there with them and you listen. But when your response to them is always empowering. Well, really, did you decide to do that because you wanted them to like you more? You just start talking to yourself this way. Is that why you did that behavior? What about if you did it differently this time? Remember that you want your intentions, your external intentions, to match your internal desire. So when you do this and when you say this, is there a different way you could do it? That's a lot different than saying, see, you blew up again. You just can't handle conflict. Your inside takes it differently. We cannot advance as individuals through self-criticism. It doesn't work that way. Our ego is way too fragile for that. It puts up a wall, and it can hear you, but it can never improve that way. It just gets scared and it digs its heels in. When you affirm yourself and say, hey, I understand, but what about we try this? It doesn't mean you excuse behavior that you don't want to continue to have. You just approach it differently. You use a more affirming self-talk with yourself instead of punishing and scaring and ridiculing. Those tactics don't work, and that, society teaches that, if you punish something, it's going to get better. It's just going to get scared, and when the ego gets scared, it performs in a way that is performs self-harm instead of self-help.
So how do we end up restoring trust in ourselves if we're at this place where we're kind of in battle with our ego?
Oh, yes, and we shouldn't battle our ego, right? The ego really, and I want to give you this very clear example, the ego is like a 2-year-old, which are so adorable, right? It is quick to realize when something is wrong, and it tries in its very 2-year-old intellect to make it right. So if you ever had a 2-year-old and they had a toy and you took it out of their hand, they know that that's wrong, and they start wailing, right? So the ego's great. It realizes that I think I've been offended, and then it's our job to parent the ego and says, yes, that didn't feel good. It didn't. Acknowledge it. That's you. You didn't like that. That's okay not to like something. It's okay to feel angry about something. How you approach it, we're not going to let the ego give us our solution. We're going to then assure the ego, and I talk out loud to myself all the time, I'll take care of this. I'll handle this for us. Right? How am I going to do that? I may not know right now, but I want you to relax. We're going to take care of this. Maybe I need to get a walk out in fresh air. Maybe I need to have a nap, cold, glass of water. But what I don't want the ego to feel is though you, ego, have to resolve this issue. The ego doesn't really want to do that. It really just wants you to know that it's offended. It's scared. It feels unsafe. Will you just please, sometimes just acknowledging it is enough. Take a moment and acknowledge what you're feeling. That restores trust that everything and everybody is not important than what you are feeling. Doesn't mean you have to act on all those feelings. You just have to acknowledge them.
I think that's where people get a little confused because they get these feelings. They're like, oh my gosh, I got to act on these, not really realizing that those are probably just feelings to acknowledge.
Yeah, and the feelings are like a thermometer. It tells you whether or not you're in a comfortable zone, you're in a red hot zone, right? It says, oh my goodness, I feel angry, and you need to stop and say, wow, I feel angry. What just happened here? Instead of trying to plow through it, and then you got all these anger signals. You just had one. If you had it, just acknowledge that one, and then allowed your body to tell you what you need. Maybe you need a cold drink of water. Maybe you need 2 minutes of isolation. Go to the bathroom. Move out of the space. Acknowledge it right then and there instead of waiting until you've got 55 of those red flags going at the end of a day, and then you're just red alarming everywhere. Stop and acknowledge, and you'll know when it's time to move forward. Say, oh, this is going to require an additional step. But that additional step will be life-affirming because you took the time to first acknowledge it, that it existed, that I'm having this feeling, I'm having this. And then sometimes it'll be just the acknowledgement, just enough. Okay, we can move on. Just wanted to make sure you saw me.
So that's what you talk about when you say that there's enduring peace that resides in each of us, and that's just how we have to tap into it?
Yeah, we have to tap into through acknowledging and pay attention to how often we ignore the internal signals. That's all. Tapping in is just, they used to say, turn in and turn off or something. I can't remember those phrases from the 80s, but when you turn inward and you become the watcher of you, your interactions with you improve, and that causes an improvement in your interactions out in the world. Your environment improves, and that is really where you get what you're looking for. That's how you find the creativity to restore your bank account, or to participate in the healing of your body, or participate in finding a new job, and participate in reducing your stress level even during this pandemic and everything that's going on. When you turn inward and become the watcher of you.
Yeah, that's so important. And my goodness. And it makes a whole lot of sense when you look at it that way. It comes full circle. We're looking at the ego, our emotions, how we can tap into peace, and how that all comes together.
Yeah, and how it's so easy. I mean, it's easy. I call it, simple hard. It's simple, but it's something that we have to practice, and we have to be so kind to ourselves and so forgiving, because you'll hear it and you say, oh my gosh, I can do that. And then 5 minutes later, your ego will get insulted. By the way, we insult our ego all the time. We don't get enough rest. We don't eat properly. We don't exercise, and the ego's insulted about that too. And it's like a little 2-year-old just throwing a tantrum in there. And then all of a sudden we'll fly off the handle. Something will happen, and then we get into this space of unforgiveness. And that's when we need to turn around to our little toddlers and say, oh my goodness, of course you would behave like that. Now, we're not going to do that again, but guess what I haven't done? We didn't eat. It's been over 5 hours. We haven't even had a snack, or what we did snack on was high sugar. So, of course, we're bouncing all over the place. Paying attention to ourselves will allow ourselves to really start to develop the trust and to access the peace that's already in there.
So I know many of our listeners are probably asking, what does your peaceful routine look like every day? Because they're probably wanting to write that down,
Oh, I would love to share this. So I work really long hours. So the people who are out there, like, I could never do this. And when I wake up in the morning, I do an active gratitude card every morning. It's a little index card I get them from the dollar store. I keep them in my desk, in my drawer next to my bedside. And I pull out a card and I write down 3 things that I am actively grateful for. But I say actively grateful, that means that I am going to manufacture excitement from the soles of my feet to the crown of my head. I'm just going to move this excitement energy. We can all do that. Like if you were playing with a little kid and you're just like, jumping around, all that kind of stuff. I do that. I write down 3 things. So today I was excited that I had to come into work early. I work in a hospital. There was some thought that we may get the vaccine today. And, there was a lot of work associated with that, but I think about the tremendous good it could possibly do. And so I got excited about that. And 2 other things I write on my card. I do that every day of my life, 7 days per week. And the reason that that's so effective is because I, like everybody else, I'm going to have challenges today. I'm going to have things that are disappointing to me today. And I'm going to want to get myself back to a steady state that is self-affirming. I look at that card, and I remember my nervous system automatically remembers, when you wrote this, this happens. A smile goes over my face. I change the energy around me. Not that the problem goes right away, but what I have just done is reduce my sympathetic nervous system response, that jittery nervous stress, and increase my parasympathetic nervous response, the calmness that has creativity, where the solution resides.
Yeah. And that's where we were talking before, like where all the magic happens, where, the creativity, the resources that come up, within ourselves to find this peaceful place to reside in.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to use that word all day today, because it really is magic what we can do for ourselves. We're constantly and continuously looking for some external source for all of the answers. And I do believe that life is a team sport. Our next level of greatness, the help that I have received in my life has come from people that I have surrounded myself with, sometimes quite accidentally, because I'm changing the energy from the inside out. So thereby, and I have so many stories I could share if we had more time, but you'll just have this inclination, let me go get a bag of chips out of the vending machine in that moment, because you have made connection with this internal peace. You get to the vending machine and there'll be somebody else. You have this conversation, which you think is completely innocuous, and there is an answer to something you've been waiting for an answer to for a long period of time. This magic is within us, within each and every one of us. We don't have to go looking for it. We just have to pay attention, become curious, attach to the energy that is producing the calmness inside of us. That calmness in the so-called storm is what we're looking for, and that is within us, within each of us. this journey requires that as we go through these different chaotic moments, that we remember how to get back to steady state.
My goodness, Dravon. I mean, we can talk for hours. I mean, you're such a light, and I so appreciate the time that we've been able to spend together today. I understand you have a book also that, our listeners can go ahead and purchase. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yes, my book is Freedom is Your Birthright. It is the first book in a 5-book series called the Stepping Stone series, and the book is available on Amazon. It's a tiny little book. I encourage you to get it. It'll become like a pocket reference, because before you know and believe that you are free to give everything in your life meaning, that's essential that you know that. Once you know that and develop practices that affirm that, then you can go on to build on that, to really participate in creating your world. And it's so exciting. You get to do this through the process of letting go and surrendering. So we're not holding on for dear life and trying to control everything.
So, Dravon, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Oh, absolutely. And if I may, I'd like to tell you I'm giving away a free giveaway, which all your listeners can benefit from. It's ways to discover your passion, 7 ways to discover and live in your passion. Absolutely free. It's a free online course, and you can get that at dravon-james@gmail.com. You just put the word free in this subject line. You can also connect with me on my show, Everyday Peace Show with Dr. Dravon James on the Unity Online Network, and through my website at www.drdravon-james.com.
Well, Dravon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dravon. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about how we find refuge in the storm. Again, if you'd like to connect with Dr. Dravon, you can at drdravon-james.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.